In this lecture, we will talk about the skin, the structure and the function of the skin. Now, as we know, skin is the outermost layer and the main purpose of the skin is to give shape to a body. Also, in simple terms, I can say skin is jack of all trades, master of none. So, with this, we start to understand what is the skin. Functions of skin. As I said, the very first function and the most important function of the skin is to give shape to the body. The next important function is to protect body from any external injury. The third important function is to prevent entry of germs. The fourth important function we can say is to prevent harmful sun rays from affecting our body. The next important function is storage. It acts as a storage, and the main idea is the storage occurs through which cells? Adipose cells, as we have understood in our previous lectures. The next important function of skin is it is one of the 5 sense organs. So it is a sensory organ. It is also an excretory organ. How can we say it is an excretory organ? Removal of excess salt from the body, excess water and excess urea from the body occurs through skin. The next important function is another way through which we understand the importance of skin is how do we perceive our surroundings. That means it has a capability to regulate the temperature of the body and regulate it at around 37 degrees Celsius, and that is another important function. If it is higher than the surrounding, what would happen? The change in the surrounding does not affect our body temperature. So if it is higher than the surrounding, it indicates a fever or a disease situation within the individual organism. Now, there are various derivatives of skin. For example, hair, nail are some of the derivatives of skin. For skin, we do have various glands. These are sweat glands, sebaceous glands, or what we say oil glands. Good important glands that you must remember are the ceruminous glands, which secrete the earwax, the meibomian glands, which lubricate the eyes. Then we also have various important other functions of the skin, which involves grip. So gripping is another important function of skin. Now, if the skin is very smooth, what would happen? The grip won't be smooth, but if the skin has grooves, then the grip becomes more easy, we can say. So function of skin is again important. Now, some important diseases or disorders associated with skin. One is leukoderma. Leukoderma is a disorder where pigmentation of the skin is not proper. So that means the skin has white patches throughout the body. We call this as leukoderma. The next is albinism. Albinism is a disorder. It is mainly a hereditary disorder, and that is due to absence of melanin in the body or improper manufacturing of melanin in the body. So eyes, iris, eyebrows, hair gets golden white in color, skin gets pinkish, and that is due to the underlying blood capillaries being exposed. Also, the person usually develops albinism only when the person gets both the albino gene, that is from the mother as well as the father. So albinism has a classic characteristic of white skin, white hair, golden white hairs, pinkish skin color, and that's due to the visibility of the blood capillaries. It is a genetic disorder due to absence of melanin pigment. The another important disorder is leukoderma, which is white patches on the skin, and that is loss of the pigmentation in the skin. So that is something which talks about the functions of the skin and the primary disorders. That during winter months our hairs get erect on the skin. The logic is very simple. We'll understand the role of erector pili muscle here. To understand what happens in summer months in contrast to winter months is pretty interesting. In the summer months, our blood vessels gets relaxed and the capillaries move towards the surface. As a result, the erector pili muscles are relaxed. When these muscles get relaxed, the air does not find space for being trapped for insulation. But during the winter months, what happens is the erector pili muscles constricts. As a result, the hair gets straightened and there is a space which is created, and this is the space where air gets absorbed, and this air acts as insulating section. So insulation occurs because of the erection of the contraction of the erector pili muscle, and this process is also known as piloerection. Why? Because of the pili muscle, as the name suggests. So constriction of the blood vessels occur in the case of winters. However, during summers it is dilation or relaxation. So in summers there is vasodilation, sweating occurs and hairs drop down. But during the winters there is constriction of the vessels that occurs, the constriction of the erector pili muscles, which leads to creation of the space. This space gets filled with air which acts as insulation, and therefore this erection of the hairs on the skin helps us in insulation. Another important way through which we escape the cold winters is shivering. Why so? Because during shivering there is rhythmic contraction of the skin muscles, and this rhythmic contraction produces heat. As a result, during the winter months, shivering is one of the ways through which we are able to adapt to the cold atmosphere. Another important term that we would understand here is goose flesh. Goose flesh is a term which is used when there is extreme winter, the hair becomes erect, and when the hair becomes erect, the skin get contracted because of the constriction of the erector pili muscle again. But it is not just during the winter months, or it is also because of nervousness, fear or extreme danger situation. So the muscle gets actually depressed in the epidermis, the hair gets erect and the muscle gets in the form of a dense structure near it, and therefore we call it as goose flesh. So goose flesh is another important term. Now, understanding the classification of skin. Skin is classified in two important categories: a proper skin and the derivatives of skin. The derivatives of skin are very simple. So here a simple derivative: nails, another good example; sweat glands, oil glands, which are also known as sebaceous glands, and mammary glands are derivatives of skin. So 5 derivatives of skin that we understand. Now, proper skin is classified into epidermis and dermis. The difference between epidermis and dermis is extremely important. Epidermis is the outermost layer. It is non-vascular in nature. That means it is without the blood capillaries. It's just an external protective covering which is responsible for protection of the body from the extreme ultraviolet rays. It is also the layer which exfoliates, that is, it removes the bacteria. It is the topmost layer that protects the body from any germs, any fungi, any bacteria that could accumulate onto the surface. Also, melanin, which is the pigmentation, is present in this layer. Another important function of the epidermis is to protect the internal organs of the body. Now, this epidermis is further classified into 3 aspects: cornified layer, glandular layer and Malpighian layer, that we would understand later. Dermis is another important layer. Now, dermis is the thick layer, but it is vascular in nature. Here is where the blood capillaries run. So when we say during the cold months, the hair on the skin gets erect, then we say there is constriction of the blood vessels. So these vessels are present where? These vessels are present in the dermis layer, not the epidermis layer. Epidermis layer is non-vascular. It does not have blood capillary. Very important to note. Dermis is the layer which is vascular. It has the supply of blood capillaries. It is living. It is relatively thick and has two important fibers that are important. The branched ones are yellow and these are elastin fibers. The white one are the collagen fibers and these white ones are unbranched. So the yellow ones, which are the elastin, are branched. The white ones, which are collagen, are not branched. So another important thing in dermis that you need to understand is branched and unbranched. The next important thing is, as we understood, dermis is the layer where blood capillaries are found. Again, this is the layer which has the blood capillaries and the sensory corpuscles. That means it is sensitive to touch, sensitive to heat, sensitive to pain. So this is the layer through which the sensations go to the brain, or the signals go to the brain. 80% of it occurs in the portion of the thickness that is maintained for the dermis, and it helps to attach the underlying organs which are present. So attachment of the organs to the dermis layer becomes important. Now if there is a burn, if it is a superficial burn, it would only affect the epidermis, but if it is a deep burn, it would affect the dermis, and if it is very severe, it could affect the internal organs through the dermis as well, because dermis is the layer which is connected to the internal organ, and this dermis has the thickness. That means it has adipose cells, and that maintains that or we can say that regulates the body temperature. So regulation of the body temperature again occurs through this layer. In the animals, what we see is hides. The hides of the animal is obtained from which layer? The hide of the animal is obtained from the dermis layer, not the epidermis layer. So again, an important thing. Now there is another important term which is known as dermal papillae. Dermal papillae are what? These are nerve endings, and these nerve endings are found on the fingertips. Now blind people have a very good sensation of these dermal papillae, and because of the dermal papillae they can sense the objects very nicely. So dermal papillae are the nerve endings on the end of the fingers, the tip of the fingers, and this helps blind people to have an extremely sensitive touch sensation through which they can understand. Also on our hand we do have furrows and ridges. These furrows and ridges, as we understood, are important for the function of grasping. If there is no furrows and ridges on the skin, what would happen? The grasp won't be that strong. It would be very silky touch, and as a result the grasp for it would be poor. So what happens for the animals? Monkeys or any arboreal animal which climb on trees have this good grasp because of the furrows and the ridges which are present here. So dermis, as I said, is vascular. It is the layer which attaches to the internal organs and is very, very important. It does have the skin proper does have the dermal papillae, which are the nerve endings, and those are responsible for the sensation. Coming on to the layer of dermis. Layer of dermis has three important layers. Cornified layer, which is known as stratum corneum. The next is the granular layer, which is known as stratum granular, and the last one is the stratum germinativum, which is the Malpighian layer. So cornified layer, granular layer, and Malpighian layers. Three layers within the topmost epidermis. Now epidermis, as I said, is without the blood capillaries. That's one very important thing. The outermost layer is the cornified layer, which is known as stratum corneum, and this is the layer which usually have the thin scale like dead cells. The outermost structure, if you visualize your skin during winter months, you would see cracks or layers or formations, and that is an example of the cornified layer. Now, in the case of animals, horns are produced because of this cornified layer. They are rich in keratin. Keratin also has this sulfur-containing horny substance, and they are called as keratinized or cornified layers. The thickness and the number of layers the numbers actually vary. The thickest or the hardest part of the cornified layer is present where? The thickest or the hardest part of the cornified layer is present in the heels, in the legs. The thick layer is also present on the palm, on the sole, and the thin layers are present on the eye layer, cornea. Cornea, again, the cornified layer is transparent. So there are various ways through which we understand the layer of the skin, which in some cases transparent, in some cases thick, as in the heels, soles, palms, and also the next is this layer is constantly replaced. This layer exfoliates and the new layer is replaced by it. This new layer is brought through the Malpighian tubes, and Malpighian tube produces constantly by the process of cell division. So the dividing layer, we could say, in the epidermis is the Malpighian layer. Then exfoliation is the process through which the removal of the cornified layer takes place. The second layer is the granular layer, which is known as stratum granulum, and this stratum granulum is the layer which is a transition layer between the cornified layer and the Malpighian layer. The Malpighian layer is the actively dividing layer, and this layer has around few oval cells, 2 to 3 oval cells or rounded cells that are present. The granular layer is the living layer, and this is by the deposition of keratin onto the cytoplasm. The last layer is the Malpighian layer within the epidermis. This is the actively dividing layer. It is known as stratum germinativum, or it is also known as Malpighi layer. This is a single layer, as you can see in the diagram. It is a constantly dividing layer and has a pigment which is known as melanin. This melanin pigment is responsible for the color of the skin. Now melanin is synthesized by what? Melanin is synthesized by phenylalanine. So phenylalanine synthesizes it, that is the phenylalanine is what? Phenylalanine is the amino acid, and its synthesis depends on what? Its synthesis depends on the enzyme which is known as triosinase. Now, the pigmentation varies. People who are living in cold climate have less melanin. That means they have less melanophores, less melanocytes, and the skin color would be relatively light. So that is again an important aspect of the Malpighian layer of the epidermis. So as I mentioned, epidermis has 3 important layers. To repeat again, those are cornified layers, granular layer, and Malpighian layer. Malpighian layer, or known as the stratum germinativum, is the layer, as the name suggests, germinativum, that is, it is germinating, it is actively dividing. And since it's the dividing layer, the cornified layer on the top exfoliates and the new cells are being replaced from the Malpighian layer. The granular layer lies in between. It is made up of 2 to 3 oval to round cells and is living in nature. And this is the basic structure of the epidermis. The dermis structure we have already understood, which is important. And as you can see in this diagram, we have also understood the role of erector pili muscle, which actually binds to the hair roots and creates a air insulation when required during the winter months, and this air insulation actually protects the outer layers or our skin, or provides insulation during the winter months by the process of vasoconstriction and piloerection. This is made possible. So this is a basic understanding of the epidermis and the dermis layer of the skin. Of skin. Derivatives of skin are extremely important. The few important derivatives are nail, hair, and then we have sweat glands, sebaceous glands, mammary glands. If we look onto the diagram that we have here, there are various corpuscles. Mesenal corpuscle is what is known as the tactile corpuscles, and this is one of the corpuscles which is responsible for the touch sensation. Understanding the first component or the derivative of skin, which is hair. Now hair acts as a protective agent. It also helps during the winter months because in the hair, surrounding the hair, the air gets trapped and it actually helps in the process of insulation. Hairs are also present in the eyelid to protect the eyes. They are present in the nostrils to protect the dust particles from entering inside. On the face they are present and they are a sign of gender recognition. So this hair, the structure of the hair comes important. Now the hair is enclosed in a sac. This sac is known as the follicle of the hair. Now follicle of the hair is made up of epithelial and connective tissues, and they are associated with the erector pili muscle. The role of the erector pili muscle is important. During the cold months there is constriction of the erector pili muscle, and that leads to erection of the hair. This hair has three important components. The outermost is the hair shaft. Hair shaft is the outermost part which is visible. This is non-living, it is keratinized, and it is actually cornified with flat cells. So if you cut the outermost layer of a hair or cut it with a scissor, you won't feel a pain, but if you try to stretch it, pull it, then you would definitely feel a pain, and that is because this hair goes deeper inside the dermis layer. In the dermis layer there is the root of the hair and the bulb of the hair. Now the root of the hair is the basal part in the dermis, which is enclosed in the follicle. So this is the follicle. Enclosed in the follicle is the root hair, and here we have the cells which are living. They are actively dividing, and these cells give rise to the hair shaft. Then this the root hairs are embedded in the bulb, the root bulb, or what we call as the hair bulb, and this is an inverted cup shaped structure, as you can see here. And this inverted cup shaped structure has numerous blood capillaries, nerve endings, the hair papilla which is present, and they are responsible for the nutrition to be provided to the hair. So the structure and the components of the hair are important. All these components, the hair cells, the sweat glands, sebaceous glands, are present in the dermis layer, revealed on the epidermis layer through the Malpighian layers. Coming on next is the next derivative of skin, which is nail. Now nail has two components. The topmost part is the nail plate, but as you can see the white portion below, which is the nail matrix, this nail matrix is actively dividing, and this is also known as lunula. So lunula is the nail matrix, it is actively dividing. The outermost layer besides the nail matrix, which is the white portion, the other part of the nail is what is known as the nail plate. It is non-living and it is keratinized, hard and brittle. Below the nail plate is the nail body. Nail body, the nail bed or the nail root is the layer which is below the nail plate and develops from the cell contributed by the cell matrix. So the matrix of the nail actually contributes to the formation of the nail body, or what is the nail bed or the nail root, and the white portion is the lunula, which is the nail matrix. So two important portions. If I look onto the structure of the nail, the lower part is the lunula or the nail matrix, the upper part is the nail plate. Below the nail plate is the nail bed, which is also known as the nail root, and that connects to the nail plate. So nail root or the nail bed is the living part. The plate is the non-living part. It is keratinized, hard and brittle. Now the function of nail is to provide protection to the fingers and the toes. The next is the oil glands. Oil glands are also known as sebaceous glands. Now these glandular pushings actually are seen on the follicular walls, and they have branched alveoli glands. Each gland has few alveoli which are present, and they release the sebum. Sebum is the waxy substance or the fatty substance that is released. Sometimes it is in the form of wax, sometimes it is in the form of steroids even. Some of the important sebaceous glands. One is the ceruminous glands. Ceruminous gland is the gland which leads to the production of earwax, which is also known as cerumen. The next important gland is the meibomian gland. Meibomian gland is the gland which actually lubricates the eyes and helps in the formation of tears. So, but it does prevent any outflow of the tear by lubricating the eyes. So meibomian glands in the eyes, ceruminous glands in the ears are important glands. Now, some modifications of the sebaceous glands that we see. In certain case, what happens? We could say certain disorders associated with sebaceous glands. If there is inflammation of the sebaceous glands, it would lead to the formation of acne. If the sebaceous glands accumulates the sebum below the skin, it would lead to formation of pimples. Now, when the sebum is actually oxidized and gets black, formation on the blackheads are seen. Common places where you can see the blackheads is the region outside the nostrils. Also, there is another disorder which is known as freckles. We won't say it as a disorder, but a change in the pigmentation. So, freckles actually mean the light and the dark patches on the skin. These light and the dark patches on the skin is due to the pigmentation by melanin or the release of melanin. Now, freckles are commonly seen on face. The light and dark patches which are seen on the face are called as freckles. The next is mammary glands. Mammary glands are again nothing but modified sweat glands. They are rudimentary in males and functional in females. There are around 15 to 20 lobes of glandular tissue that actually connect together to form the milk duct, and this becomes functional after the birth of the child. The next is sweat glands. Sweat glands are tubular portionings which originate in the dermis but come out through the epidermis, and they are derived from the Malpighian layer. So, sweat glands are derived from Malpighian layer. They are present in the dermis, come out in the epidermis, and on the surface they are revealed in the form of pores. The distal part is coiled and glandular in nature. The distal part also have lots of blood capillaries which are present. Now, some examples where sweat glands are uniquely found. In the case of rabbit, if we see the rabbit has a very rich clothed hair, we could say, but the presence of sweat glands are very few. On the other hand, in the rabbit, there are numerous sweat glands which are present on the lips. So, one classic example is rabbit. If we talk about human beings, there are around 1 million sweat glands that are present. In a region of just 1 square kilometer, there are around 400 sweat glands, just 1 square centimeter. Okay, in a region of just 1 square centimeter, there are around 400 sweat glands on the palms. However, on the back of the body, there are around 60 to 80 sweat glands. So, the number of sweat glands across the body at different places do vary. Sweating occurs normally in summer, but it can occur due to nervousness, due to danger sign, due to shivering, weakness. Sometimes we call it as cold sweating. Cold sweating is associated because of weakness, nausea, or extreme pain that could be witnessed by the body. These sweat glands could be classified into two: eccrine sweat glands and apocrine sweat glands. Eccrine sweat glands are present throughout the body. So it starts with eccrine, E, and therefore you can remember it. It is present on entire body. So E for entire body, E for eccrine gland. So eccrine sweat glands are present on the entire body. However, apocrine sweat glands are present only in the axillary and the genital parts. I repeat again, the classification of sweat glands is important. It is eccrine and apocrine. Eccrine starts with E. So the good way to remember is E for eccrine, E for entire. That means eccrine sweat glands are present on the entire body. Apocrine sweat glands are present only on the axillary parts or the genital parts. And in the apocrine glands, there are hair follicles that do mix with sebum or the oil glands. However, the eccrine sweat glands release only sweat. So another important difference that you must remember here: sweat is odorless, colorless. It is when the organic compounds decompose, and this decomposition produces unpleasant odor because of the bacterial growth. We say that the sweat is odor has an odor or an unpleasant odor. But originally, if we talk about sweat, it is odorless, it is colorless, but it is only when the organic compounds are decomposed by the bacteria on the surface of the skin, then this unpleasant odor originates. Usually, to avoid that unpleasant odor, antiperspirants are used, which are zinc compounds. Again, important to note, they are made up of zinc. Zinc acts as or stops the secretion by the sweat glands, and this is therefore used in antiperspirants. So this was about understanding the derivatives of the